people with the best sense of humor aren't always the ones performing it. They're not always the ones getting the attention. Often the people with the best sense of humor are the ones who are laughing the most. So they're generously giving their attention to other people. They are noticing things that are odd and unusual and delightful throughout their day. They're laughing about it, even if they're not sharing it with other people.
That's Chris Duffy. He's an award-winning comedian, television writer, and radio podcast host. He's also the author of Humor Me, How Laughing More Can Make You Present, Creative, Connected, and Happy. Chris has lots of great insights on how to use humor at work. So you'll learn 1, why to take humor seriously at work. 2, the simple habit that makes you more magnetic. And 3, how to find humor in the most unlikely places. And if you want a summary write-up of the actual wisdom that Chris shares, I recommend you sign up for the free Gold Nugget email newsletter found at awesomeatyourjob.com. I'm Pete Mockaitis. This is How to Be Awesome at Your Job. And now, here's Chris. Chris, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm excited to talk about humor, and not just for the fun of it, but how it can actually enhance our experience of career and job and be an asset in that zone. But could you kick us off with a fun story about some of your most memorable moments in your career as a comedian?
Probably the most memorable moment I've ever had in my career as a comedian is I was a 5th grade teacher before I did comedy. And so I never had use for LinkedIn because, listen, like, you don't get a job as a 5th grade teacher through LinkedIn, like business networking, and you don't get a job as a comedian through LinkedIn networking. So I never had a LinkedIn profile, but I'd always heard about it. And I was curious about the world. So one day I went on and said, like, okay, I'm just going to make a profile. And the first thing I realized is you could just say you work wherever. Like, they don't, if you say you work for Nike, they don't like email a Nike hiring manager, which struck me as completely bizarre. And so I wanted to see how high up I could go. So I made my job on LinkedIn the CEO of LinkedIn. And I thought, like, when I click save, it'll say error, you can't do that. But instead, not only did it let me do that, it sent an automated email to everyone in my contacts list that said, congratulate Chris on his new job. He is now CEO of LinkedIn, which is, to me, that's the funniest joke that I've ever been involved in. And I didn't even make it. It was just LinkedIn's like automatic emailing thing. And then I was the CEO of LinkedIn on LinkedIn for a full year. And at a year, it sent another email to everyone in my contacts list saying, congratulate Chris on his 1-year work anniversary as CEO of LinkedIn. And that started going a little viral. And so I got a message from someone on LinkedIn's trust and security team. My account was frozen. And you can't make this up. The person on the trust and security team, her name was Faith. And Faith said, your account has been locked due to concerns about its inaccuracy. So I sent her, I didn't want to let the joke go because I love the joke so much. So I sent her a photo of my license front and back and said, there's proof that my name is actually Chris Duffy. And Faith said, the problem is not that we don't believe your name is Chris Duffy. The problem is you are claiming to be the CEO of LinkedIn. And I said, Faith, you are taking a pretty disrespectful tone for someone who works for me. And 5 seconds later, she permanently deleted my account. And so that was the end of my time on LinkedIn, but a very memorable moment in my comedy career.
That's fun. Okay, so one takeaway I'm gleaning right away is go ahead and lie about how senior you are on LinkedIn, and the odds are pretty good you can skate by for a good while with that.
You know, if there's one message I have for people, it's commit some light fraud. No, that's not my message. I think the heart of what I like about that is that no one was going to hire me anyway from LinkedIn. So I think the thing that I encourage people to do is to like think a little outside of the box, to not be afraid to play around and to have fun and to do something that is silly, even in a place where it's serious. And LinkedIn is a great example of a place where people tend to take themselves so seriously. So I think the more that you can be like human and playful and fun, the more that things stand out. You definitely can't and shouldn't do what I did, because actually one of my lasting contributions to society after me, they did make it so you can't do that anymore.
Okay. Well, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Your ripple.
We all want to have an impact. You know, we want to affect the generations after us.
It reverberates. That's beautiful.
Yes.
All right. Well, and so it's funny. I'm thinking I actually do follow a couple satire accounts on LinkedIn, and it's really funny in terms of the difference, the contrast when there is sort of a vibe, a tone, a subculture, a script, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's a little bit of a feel for how a LinkedIn post is, quote unquote, supposed to go. Like,
totally.
One sentence hook grabbing you, like, I had to fire someone today. Like, huh? What? Why? I had to know the rest, you know?
Here's what my wedding taught me about peer-to-peer marketing, you know, something like that. It's like,
yeah, like what?
What? Mm-hmm. What are you talking about? I think it's true. There's in a lot of our lives, right? Professional, personal, social, there are these like scripts that we're supposed to follow, or we think we're supposed to follow. I think it's a better way to put it, right? Where it's like, someone says, hey, how are you? Doing pretty well. Yeah, crazy weather, right? Like you just kind of like, that's what small talk is supposed to go like. And I think the thing about when we get into autopilot like that is that things just blur into the background. They're not memorable and we don't make real connections and we're not actually our full human selves. And to me, the beauty of humor is that it lets us laugh about and acknowledge these like ruts that we get into that we don't even realize are just like our habits. And the thing that I love about laughing with other people is like when you connect with them, you are actually genuinely connected, but also then people like you more. They feel like attracted to you. And I don't mean like romantically attracted. They like want to spend time with you. And there's a lot of great studies that we can talk about that show that like from a professional standpoint, if you are acknowledging things in a funny, humorous way where you're willing to laugh at yourself, people respect you more, even if what you're acknowledging is like your shortcoming. They did a psychological study where they looked at people in job interviews, and people who acknowledged their shortcomings, like the things they didn't know but made a joke about it, were much more likely to get hired than people who didn't acknowledge it at all, or than who acknowledged it in a serious way. Because we like those people, we trust them, and we want people to admit that they're not perfect, because we're not perfect either.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I'm just speculating as to the why behind that. And it feels as though if someone is capable of acknowledging their shortcomings in a fun, lighthearted way, it kind of gives a subtle, implicit permission that it's okay to talk about those kinds of things with me. And maybe it's okay to talk about a broad range of things with me. And so there's just a little bit more of a vibe of comfort and safety. I'm totally reading a lot into this, but this is how I'd speculate are the underlying kind of facets that make it go that way.
I think that's totally plausible. And I think another piece is that if you're willing to laugh about the things that you don't know or that you're not good at, it probably means that those are places where you would be able to improve as well, because you're open to feedback on them. You're open to growth. Whereas the things that you get defensive about that are like no-go conversation topics, it's really hard to then grow in those because you're locked in to like your idea that I already know everything there is to know about this. And none of us do. I'll give you another study that I love. Psychologists at a number of universities, they did a study where people evaluated job candidates. And so they didn't know that the people they were evaluating were actually research assistants reading from a script. But when they were evaluating these candidates, of course, everyone rated the people who were qualified more highly than people who were unqualified. No surprise there. But between the people who were qualified, there was two people who were exactly identical, except one of them spilled a whole cup of coffee on their shirt before they came in for the interview. And they said like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I spilled coffee all over myself. And that person, the coffee spiller, was consistently rated higher, was rated more confident, and was the one that people thought they should hire for the job. And for me, the big lesson that I take away is not like, if you're applying for a job, dump a scalding hot cup of coffee on yourself. That's not the lesson. The lesson is that we have this idea that we're supposed to be perfect, right? That people want us to be like flawless and perfect and have no mistakes and just impressive. And in fact, when you're like that, people can't latch onto you. They can't relate to you at all. People much prefer someone who is a little bit of a mess, but is still good at their job and good at the things they need to be good at. And so to me, I think lowering the bar in that way makes you so much more desirable as a job candidate, but also just as a person to work with. I mean, think about it, Pete. Like, I give you an example. In your real life, I think there's an intuitive example is if you, Pete, walk into a room and you meet someone and he goes, hey, by the way, Pete, nice to meet you. I have a 6-pack. I make $1 million a year. I give to charity every single day. And I work at a soup kitchen. And by the way, both of my kids went to Harvard. And I think I'm probably going to be nominated for a Nobel Prize. You don't like that person. You know what I mean? At best, you're intimidated. And more likely, you're like, I hate this guy. I never want to see this guy ever again. That's certainly how I would feel. Whereas if you meet someone who's like, hey, can you do me a favor? I think that my pants might have just ripped, right? Like you have a lot more to talk about, a lot more to relate with that guy, even though it's a little weird because they're not perfect and you're not immediately intimidated and or jealous and have all these other feelings about them.
Yes. And what's coming to mind right now is internet personality. Her name is Elise Myers. And I just got her book. She's so delightful. Oh, it's so funny. Everyone loves her. That's kind of where I'm going with that. I think her moniker is like the internet's best friend or everyone's best friend on the internet, something like that. Uh-huh. And she's repeatedly sharing her shortcomings, her foibles, struggles with mental health and more. But she's clearly very smart and very funny and very insightful and very personable. And then when you bring those two things together, yeah, she's the internet's best friend.
Well, I think the fact that you said very smart is actually, I think, really a huge and important piece here. I, for years now, have hosted a comedy show with the National Academy of Sciences where we interview scientists about their work. And, I've interviewed Nobel laureates, I've interviewed MacArthur geniuses, all these really incredible people. And the number one thing that I've noticed is that people who are willing to say, I don't know, or to be funny or to laugh at their own research, those are the people who are actually super intelligent, right? Like the people who don't have a sense of humor and aren't willing to admit that they don't know some things or get defensive and blocked off. Those are rarely the real geniuses. Because when you actually are exceptional at something, you have a level of confidence and comfort with admitting the limits of your own knowledge and also with trying to explain it simply and not just like relying on jargon. So I think there's a real piece there of like smart people. You can signal your comfort and your intelligence by laughing and by the things that you're willing to laugh at and be open about.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I like that a lot. Well, so can you give us maybe a story, an example of someone in a professional context who upgraded some of their humor skills and found that genuinely helpful or transformative for their career?
One that immediately comes to mind is I talked to a former Navy SEAL, Joe Choi. And Joe was in a very extreme life or death situations often. Even just the training for Navy SEALs can be really, really dangerous. And when Joe was promoted so that now he was leading a team, he realized really quickly that the way to actually have people respect him, the way to have the men trust him and know that in these life or death situations that he was someone they could rely on wasn't to be super serious all the time. The way he put it to me is that the best leaders that he had encountered as a SEAL, the best leaders took the work really seriously, but they did not take themselves so seriously. And so he found that he was able to motivate his team and to get them to be much more connected to him by being willing to laugh at himself. And he told me probably the most dramatic laughing at yourself story I've ever heard, which is he was doing a training exercise where you were supposed to grab onto a ladder hanging out of a helicopter while you were in rough ocean waters. And Joe managed to grab onto the ladder. He was going to demonstrate what to do. And he managed to grab onto the ladder, but he grabbed onto the wrong side. So instead of being able to climb up, he was actually getting dragged under the water. And he was struggling to breathe. He was like about to pass out when he finally was able to like pull himself up and flip over the ladder and climb up into the helicopter. And when he got up, he was kind of gasping for breath and struggling. And, it had really been a dire situation. And he says that all the guys who he's supposedly leading are looking at him after this like scary and also not really like great example of how you're supposed to do it. And one of the guys just said, wow, that was some real frogman. And then they all looked at Joe and they saw if he would laugh. And Joe laughed really hard. And he said that became this moment for his group where they came back to it and it was like a bonding thing, but it was also a moment where they trusted that he was confident enough and honest enough about what had happened that he was willing to laugh and acknowledge that he hadn't done it right. And he said that was something that really came back and again in the group trusting him.
That's really nice. Well, can you share with us, I think we like humor. Humor's fun. The points you're bringing up make sense. They check out. So what are some things that we do with that knowledge? Do you have any sort of key pro tips or questions or ways you recommend we go forward and do more good humoring?
I will say that I think the biggest thing that people get wrong about humor is I think people often think that having a great sense of humor means you are the one on stage with the microphone or in the circle at the party or at the water cooler where everyone is around listening to your story and you're the one that's getting all the attention. And I would actually say that not that that's not good humor, but the people with the best sense of humor aren't always the ones performing it. They're not always the ones getting the attention. Often the people with the best sense of humor are the ones who are laughing the most. So they're generously giving their attention to other people. They are noticing things that are odd and unusual and delightful throughout their day. They're laughing about it, even if they're not sharing it with other people. And I think that when you broaden your definition of good humor and what good humoring looks like to include that kind of humor, you avoid a lot of the pitfalls. Because one of the big things that people always say is like, well, how do I make a joke that doesn't offend people? Or what if I cross a line? And the answer that I would say to them is the safest way that you can bring more humor into your life is to not be the one making the joke, to find people who make you laugh and to laugh with them. People love that. The number one way to make someone like you is not to talk more, it's to listen more. So I think if you can bring humor into your life in those other ways, that will really make you magnetic to other people because you're having fun. So something I would ask you is like, who are the people that already make you laugh? How can you spend more time with them? what are the ways that you are naturally laughing already? So maybe one exercise that I really encourage, which is really simple, but I think can be transformative, is just keep track of everything for a week that makes you laugh, or a month, however long, but write it down. Write it down on a piece of paper or in a notes app on your phone. And what you'll find is that just the act of paying attention makes more and more things surface, right? Anytime we direct our attention towards something, we find more and more. And so having more of that humor and that laughter in your life is going to make you the kind of person who laughs more and has more fun. And that has all these benefits, both professionally and personally.
And I think that's a theme that's come up elsewhere in terms of like gratitude. If you are identifying things that you feel grateful for, or that turned out better than you thought they might in the course of the day, you are more inclined to notice more such things and feel more gratitude. So
totally.
In like fashion here, by taking note and attending to that which is funny, you're having more of those good humor vibes going on.
I think this is kind of true of anything, right? Like I talked to a guy recently who is a roofer, and he was just kind of telling me about like what a good roof is versus a bad roof and the kinds of roof that he likes working on and all that. And then I was walking around afterwards and I noticed, oh, these roofs, right? These things that have been totally invisible to me. All of a sudden, I was like, that's a nice roof. Oh, that roof needs some repairs. And I have no ability to actually like repair a roof or know about it. But just having talked to someone who had a real passion for it and knew a lot about it, all of a sudden, this piece of the world that was invisible became really visible to me. And I think the same is true kind of for anything, right? Like if you're always looking for professional chances to connect, you'll find more chances to connect. And I think what I love about humor is that it offers us the ability to take ourselves less seriously, to make other people want to be around us, and to have a better time all at once. Because it's like, without trying to think like, I should have social connections, if you focus on laughing, people want to be around you. You're a magnetic person. And so just by noticing more of this stuff, you get those side benefits.
Okay, so to do the noticing, I'm just going to pay attention. I'm going to write it down. Are there any key prompts or internal questions you recommend can generate more of this good stuff?
So for me, for more than a decade, I've been a professional comedian, both like writing late night comedy shows and telling jokes and as a stand-up and doing all sorts of other stuff. And what I found is that actually the most interesting part of comedy is not the performing. It's actually the generating the ideas and then noticing the material, because that's the part that I think anyone can do, regardless of whether you perform or not professionally, right? Like everyone can have more laughter in their life. And so the first thing that I would say is the seed of something funny is something that is a little unusual or off or different than expected. The gap between how things are supposed to be or how we think things are going to go and how they actually are is where comedy lives. So one of the things that I would do is focus really small. The artist's sister, Corita Kent, had a practice that she did where she would literally carry around a rectangular frame made of cardboard. And she would just, for her art, would hold up that frame and just look at what was inside the frame. Everything else, narrow her field of vision. And that's where she would find the art. And I think you can literally do that for comedy. Just look at a corner of your house and just spend 5 minutes noticing all of the small things in that. What are the things that are a little off or a little weird or a little different? And you're not going to find something laugh out loud funny right away. But you might find something small and odd that then you can think about and is the seed of it. Or a more relatable way, I think, is, Pete, when you go to someone's house for the first time and you go in their bathroom, you notice all sorts of stuff about their bathroom, right? You notice like, where is the toilet paper? Is it hanging over? Is it hanging under? What kind of soap do they have? Do they have a hand towel? Do they have paper towels? Is there a pile of books next to their toilet? Do the books kind of seem like weirdly wet? Is there a candle? Is there a little spray? All this stuff in their bathroom. But if you go to their house a few times, that fades into the background really quickly. It just becomes a bathroom. So the more that you can switch into that like new bathroom mindset where you're actually noticing the things in your life, the more that you can see the things that are odd and unusual and delightful. And that can really make you laugh. So can we do an experiment like in real time rather than having this be a...
Well, yeah, I was just about to go there in terms of, okay, looking at a corner for 5 minutes, how might that turn into some chuckles?
So, okay, so right now you're in a hotel room, right?
I am in a hotel. I've had some flight cancellation action.
Great. So a hotel is kind of one of the like most kind of stereotypically antiseptic places, right? Like it's all the character has been taken out of it. And sometimes that can be hard to find something funny, but sometimes that in itself is the funniness, that they've tried so hard to make no design choices, that it is bland in a way that is exceptionally bland. So I would look around and be like, is there any art on the walls? Hotel art is often funny to me because it's like, what is the choice? Why is that the art? What strikes your interest right away? Or what do you notice right away?
Well, what's interesting is that there's these vases on top of inside floating shelves that are tapered and they're like pierced, almost like it was a dagger that punched through this hanging shelf.
That is already incredible. I mean, that's already really funny and like to think like the person who was like, I know what they need. They need shelves that have been stabbed by a dagger. That will be our brand.
Yeah.
Right? Like that. And that's a good example of like, you could spend a week in a hotel room and never notice that, I think. But then you see it and you think about it.
No, and I like what you did there, because in a way, because what you said is like the seed is something that's a little off, unusual, unexpected. And that was that. But you didn't bring me into the chuckle zone until you went that extra step associated with imagining the people who were discussing this and deciding, yes, this is what's necessary. And that's just funny but really, who had this conversation? How did this come about? It's genuinely silly.
Yeah. Well, it's also one of those things where like, I think about this a lot where when I'm in my own house and trying to find things that make me laugh, one thing that I always think is so funny is on my washing machine, it says like bright whites, TM, trademark. And I'm like, I love the person who was there who was like, listen, LG is going to own the phrase bright whites. That is our phrase. That's really important. And I'm like, I think that is not actually a trademark. Like you might technically have that trademark, but bright whites is not memorable for anyone else. That's just the white setting on my washing machine. I don't think that you needed to trademark that. And thinking about the person whose job that is, this was probably like a series of interviews. There's just like in an interview, they were like, I have a vision for like naming the white cycle, something that we can own that will be like part of LG's brand. And then they had a bunch of meetings and they filed paperwork and there was a lawyer involved. That kind of stuff. Thinking about like the world behind the things that you're seeing that are odd is often where I find things the most funny.
That is good. Yes. And so once again, it's sort of like you're noticing the thing and then you're going deeper into it. And I'm sort of imagining the lawyer there bumping into bright whites on like a GE washing machine and said, what? It's like they just become utterly furious. And he like calls up their lawyer and starts like cussing them out and screaming. It's like, if you think you can pull this stunt, you got another thing coming. I'm going to see you in court. And they duke it out.
You think you can screw me like this? Oh, you can't. I will not allow this. No one messes with me.
Yeah. Bright whites, the trial of the century.
It's true. And, and that often is called the trial of the century. A lot of people don't know that, but that was the real trial of the century. Something that is a trick that we often do to make something funny in professional comedy, but I think you can apply this to your own life too, is to take an observation and then layer on top an emotion. So if you're writing a joke, like one of the ways you can write a joke is, I find it so scary that blank. I find it so exciting that blank. I am so happy that this thing happened, right? Like putting an emotion tells the audience how to feel about it. And often that I'm happy that this thing happened is what makes the audience laugh, because then you've set up, here's what I expect, and then you can turn it in another direction. And I think anytime we're communicating, letting the people we're communicating with know how we feel about something, and then the specific detail that we feel that about, that really lets them latch on to something really clearly. So like, I am so confused by the vases in my hotel room, or I absolutely love the way the vases in my hotel room were pierced by a dagger, right? Like that is a sentence that people can latch onto emotionally.
And well, now I'm sort of combining these things. I'm thinking about if you have an emotion associated with a thing that is unusual, it feels like, well, we're in comedic territory per your previous notion. So I'll throw this out here. When I have all of my laundry done, folded, and placed in the dresser, I feel a sense of power.
That's great.
Like I'm unstoppable.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's a little bit unusual to feel a really strong emotional association with these somewhat ordinary occurrences in life. So it feels like we're in fertile comedic territory here, Chris, but nothing hilarious is coming to mind.
Oh, I think that is hilarious. I completely disagree. I think that you feeling like I am powerful and I am the master of my domain because I folded my laundry is so funny and so relatable and wonderful. And I actually think this hits at a thing that is, talking about how to be awesome at your job. You just naturally did this piece, which is you took that noticing and then you put it onto yourself. So now we're laughing at ourselves and the fact that you're like, the most powerful I ever feel, the most in control I ever feel is when I finish folding a towel. That towel is perfect, right? Like there's something hilarious about that and also very relatable, but it's also that you're laughing at yourself. And this, again, from a professional standpoint, being willing to laugh at yourself, being willing to like give people that lets people connect with you. It lets people not feel intimidated by you, but also be impressed by you, because it is really impressive to have this kind of like self-knowledge. And so I think you just naturally did it in a really beautiful way. I think that's genuinely very, very funny.
Okay, interesting. So that's funny for you.
This is an important thing.
Okay.
It's funny for me. Often the things that are funniest for other people are actually quite obvious to us. They don't seem funny because it's like, well, that's just me being genuine and honest. But our authentic, genuine, honest feelings are often very funny to other people because there's this gap between how we actually feel and how we're supposed to feel, right? You're not supposed to feel powerful and in control when you finish folding the laundry, but you actually do. So for you, it's kind of like, but yeah, that's how I feel. And for me, it's really funny because I haven't ever thought about it that way.
You're illuminating a decade plus mystery for me. And that is the TV show, The Big Bang Theory. I'm not really a fan. I don't find it that amusing.
Yep.
And so we got Sheldon, who expresses his ideas in a very, scientific-y, multi-syllables, big words, whatever kind of a way. And then the laugh track always hits. And I'm just like, the dude is just expressing his mind. This is not actually a joke at all. But the funny thing is, in some ways, I at times can speak like him. I have a friend who's like, oh, my friend's like Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory. So for me, it's not funny because it's not unusual, because I am also talking weird in a way that's sort of like Sheldon. And that's, maybe there's a level of self-insight, self-awareness to be had from that. And that's really intriguing in terms of, they think it's funny. I don't, because I think that's just how some people talk and that's normal-ish. But apparently that's very...
What is funny about Sheldon? He is a normal, attractive, intelligent man. He's a totally socially normal, intelligent, attractive man. I think he is the peak of masculinity, and I don't see anything funny about him. Like, that is a really funny perspective to have, right?
Yes, yeah, that is, well, I would call it masculine, etc. But yeah, that's intriguing that other people... And that's just a good heads up. It's like, hey, don't get angry if folks are laughing at that. It's not hostile, that they're just appreciating something that's kind of special or unique or different about you relative to perhaps the human norm.
Yeah, well, I want to unpack that if it's okay. I want to unpack that a little bit.
Sure.
On the one hand, sure, like most times I think people laughing is not something to be offended by. It's actually like a point of connection. But that doesn't mean that people can laugh and be really mean and bullying you. So I think it's possible to like, you should be offended sometimes. So I think it really depends. I think one of the things that is challenging about humor in terms of like the context that we're in is there's no such thing as a universal joke. There's no such thing that's always funny.
Yeah.
Humor is always subjective. It's always context dependent. So you strike me, I mean, we just met, but you strike me as like a confident, socially adapted and successful person. Handsome, charming, wealthy, powerful. I could go on and on.
That checks out.
But as a result, like if we laugh about how you're like Sheldon in some ways, I don't think that's hitting at some sort of like deep insecurity. And so as a result, it is funny and it's not bullying. But if that wasn't the case and you actually did feel like maybe you had a deep insecurity about how you fit in and that people were always laughing at you. And then we laughed about how you're like Sheldon. That could actually be a really cruel, mean thing that wasn't. So I always go back to like, is the laughter forming connection or is it pushing the person away? Are you trying to exclude them or include them? And the kind that is really successful in our social lives, in our friendships, in our relationships, in our work is the kind that brings people in and makes people connect to us, not that pushes people away. And that's always context dependent. You can't just have a universal rule. And speaking of that, right, like laughing at yourself is great in a professional setting, but there are these like lines. If you're the leader of a company, people want to be able to connect to you. But also, I've learned about the concept of selective vulnerability, which is like, if you're a leader and you go into a meeting and you say, hey, everyone, the economics are really bad and we're going to have to lay a bunch of people off and I'm really terrified and I have no idea how this is going to go. Like that might be really authentic and honest and vulnerable. But it's not the right thing to say. People are going to be terrified and scared after that. Instead, you might want to be selectively vulnerable. So say like, hey, I'm aware that we are going into a really hard time. And I just want to say, we acknowledge that and we're going to figure out the way through together. So you're still kind of acknowledging, you're not denying the reality, but you're not saying like, I'm terrified and I have no idea what to do next, because that's not a helpful form of vulnerability. And even if that would get like a laugh in my context, it's not worth the laugh.
And do you have any thoughts about humor in terms of boosting resilience, ability to bounce back from mistakes, failures, these kinds of things?
Totally. I mean, I think this goes back to like my core message, which is that we think we're supposed to be perfect. And in fact, you're not supposed to be perfect. The most resilient people understand that like a mistake is part of the process. For me, in my work, right, like if I go up on stage and I tell a joke and it bombs, no one laughs at all. If I say, oh, that means I'm a terrible comedian, then I'll never tell jokes again. Instead, what I need to say is like, oh, that was information. And because the goal isn't to have one perfect night of comedy, the goal is to over time get better and better. Then I say like, next time I tell that joke, I will try clarifying it or I'll phrase it in a different way. And I think that's kind of true for all jobs, right? It's like if you view it as an iterative, repetitive thing where you can laugh about your mistakes and not feel like it's indicative that you are some huge disaster or failure, then you get better and better, because the point is to have the 100th time be better than the first, not for the first to be perfect. And laughter, I think, really helps us with that process because it takes away the judgment and shame, and it makes it so that it's like fun to share how badly something went, and it's fun to laugh at it rather than to think this is like a thing I need to sweep under the rug and not let anyone see.
Well, Chris, tell me any key do's or don'ts, top things you want to make sure to mention before we hear about some of your favorite things.
Well, the number one things I want people to do are keep track of things that are making you laugh naturally, pay attention to the world around you. And I would say that the number one other thing that you should do once you've done those is try taking a small social risk and sharing something that makes you laugh with someone else. Don't just have the same regular conversation you have every day. Pretty hot outside, huh? Or, whoa, crazy weather. Instead, try telling them, like, the other day on the way to work, I saw a squirrel try and jump from one tree to another and it fell. Have you ever seen that? A squirrel missed the tree? Even if the other person doesn't laugh, you're going to have a different conversation than you would have had otherwise. And I think that is both the seed of connection, but also the seed of so much laughter and joy in comedy.
Beautiful. Thank you. Well, it's funny with that squirrel, you're right. That opens all sorts of avenues of conversation in terms of...
What does it make you think? There's something boiling around in your head right now.
Well, yeah. I was like, well, was the squirrel okay? What happened afterwards? If you plummeted a long distance, you know, was it grass? Was it concrete? Like, did it get up and keep moving, or was he done for? I mean,
oh, wow. Okay. You know, that is just indicative of what a kind, caring human being you are. And I will tell you, this is a true thing that happened to me. The squirrel I saw fell a small distance onto grass. It got right back up, but then it looked at me like, you saw that. Oh, you weren't supposed to see that. And then it ran away. So we just shared a really beautiful interspecies moment of don't tell anyone about this. And here I am telling all of the listeners of how to be awesome at your job. And that squirrel is furious somewhere. Who is also, by the way, a listener. I could tell. He seemed like he's listening to this podcast.
Yeah. Well, now that makes me laugh because I'm imagining a squirrel with headphones that are, you know, pushing in the squirrel cheeks, you know, even more.
Oh, yeah.
Even more fat and squirrel-like.
And he's wearing some of your merch, right? He has like a t-shirt with your face on it. And he says like, that's nuts.
Oh, wow. All right, man. This is your life. Like all day, your brain gets to play here.
As excruciating as that joke was, and terrible dad joke, that is my life. That is for sure.
Big thanks to Chris for sharing his wisdom with us. And big thanks to our sponsors. Check them out. One sponsor to check out is Monarch. I don't enjoy thinking about or fiddling with money, so I love resources that make this quicker and easier. Set yourself up for financial success this year. Monarch is a gorgeous personal finance tool that makes your money life easier. It brings your whole money picture from budgets to accounts and transactions and investments into one super handy dashboard on your phone or laptop. I was such a fan of the old Mint.com and was super bummed when it disappeared. But the good news is that Monarch was founded by a team that includes the original product manager of Mint, and I dare say it's even better. I like the graphical summaries that help me drill down into things quickly and easily, and helps me get to the bottom of anything that just seems off or weird, or helps me zero in on great opportunities for savings faster. In fact, Monarch helped the average user save over $200 per month after joining. So set yourself up for financial success in 2026 with Monarch, the all-in-one tool that makes proactive money management simple all year long. Use code AWESOME at monarch.com for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarch.com with code AWESOME. One sponsor to check out is Shopify. When you're starting something new, what ifs abound. What if I fail? What if nobody cares? What if nobody buys my stuff? Shopify can help make things easy. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the U.S., from household names like Magic Spoon and Allbirds to brands just getting started. Shopify facilitates everything from inventory to payments to analytics and more. No need to use a dozen different software tools. Everything's all in one place, making your life easier and your operations smoother. And what if you get stuck? Well, Shopify is always around to share advice with their award-winning 24/7 customer support. You can get started with your own design studio with hundreds of ready-to-use templates. Shopify helps you build a beautiful online store that matches your brand style. It's time to turn those what-ifs into ka-ching with Shopify today. Sign up for your $1 per month trial today at shopify.com/awesome. Go to shopify.com/awesome. That's shopify.com/awesome. Ka-ching. One sponsor to check out is Vanguard. As we step into a new year, it's the perfect time for all the advisors listening to think about how to set up your clients for success. One way to do that is to level up your fixed income strategy. But bonds are tricky. The market is huge, rates shift, and risks hide in plain sight. That's why having a partner with scale and expertise matters. Vanguard brings both. Vanguard bonds provide top-grade products across the board. Their lineup includes over 80 bond funds actively managed by a 200-person global squad of sector specialists, analysts, and traders. Vanguard's been in the game for a long time at a scale that gives them a serious edge. They're able to invest across many sectors, maturities, and geographies, spotting opportunities that others might miss. Vanguard takes a steady approach, focusing on reliability and consistency. So if you're looking to give your clients consistent results year in and year out, go see the record for yourself at vanguard.com/audio. That's vanguard.com/audio. All investing is subject to risk. Vanguard Marketing Corporation, distributor. All right. Well, now could you share with us a favorite quote, something you find inspiring?
I've been thinking about George Orwell talking about humor, and he said, every joke is a tiny revolution.
And a favorite book?
One of the best books that I've read is Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower. I think that's a really relevant book to our world today, and also just a beautifully written book.
And a favorite tool, something you use to be awesome at your job?
Oh, let's say a microphone. That's probably the only tool that I use regularly. And anyone who's seen me try and do home repair will tell you that's the only tool that I'm safe to be around. So a microphone.
Well, you sound good. So I'll ask, what are you working with there?
Okay, this is a, hold on, I got to look at it. It is a RE320, an Electro Voice RE320, baby. Oh yeah, that smooth radio sound. Hello.
And a favorite habit?
I've been trying to do the 7-minute a day workout app. And when I do that, I feel a lot better. And it only takes 7 minutes. So that's a good habit.
And is there a key nugget you share that really seems to connect and resonate with folks? They quote it back to you often?
When people yell something back at me, it is often, sir, you need to move, or out of the way. Probably the key nugget, I think, from all of the work that I've done on humor is to be willing to laugh at yourself and to connect with other people through laughing more and taking yourself less seriously. I think even in hard times, finding something to laugh about. And it could be as simple as watching a clip of outtakes from The Office, or going on Reddit's contagious laughter subreddit, or it can be an inside joke that you've laughed about with friends. But I think that idea that when you're having a hard day, going back to something that reliably makes you laugh can transform part of the day. That's something that I think is the biggest thing. And also kind of an obvious and intuitive one, but that we forget to do so often.
All right. And if folks want to learn more, get in touch. Where'd you point them?
ChrisDuffyComedy.com. That's the place.
And do you have a final challenge, call to action for folks looking to be awesome at their jobs?
At your job, find the person who makes you laugh and spend more time with them this week. And then share something with them that made you laugh. I think that connecting on something that's lighthearted and fun, is going to make that person want to be around you more. And it's also going to make them feel really honored that like you're the person that laughs at them the most in a positive way. And I think that those connections pay dividends in ways that we can never expect professionally.
All right. Chris, thank you.
Thank you.
I really appreciated Chris's insight that humor is found in the gap between how things are and how you would expect them to be, or how they should be, or what's sort of normal or standard. And I'm finding it's a very useful mental exercise to observe these things and then think about it. How can that be funny? And sure enough, in so doing, stuff is funnier more often, and life is a bit brighter and more joyous and having some more laughs. So great stuff from Chris. If you want to check out the show notes or the transcript or the links to items that we've referenced, please drop on by awesomeatyourjob.com/EP1140. Hope to catch you next time, and peace.